Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's device management interface call. Thanks for joining. And as usual, the call is recorded and will be posted on YouTube. I think I missed the last one. Sorry about that. I'll do them both after this one. So if you please be mindful of what you share, and if you don't want to be recorded, please leave the meeting. Okay, having said that, I think the topics for today is mainly having a discussion around the protos, where we stand, what we can do if we can merge them, and if there are any comments related to them. So I'd go and start with that. Does anybody have any more comments or anything they want to share on the protos that Amit and Deutsche Telekom proposed? I hope everybody had some time since last week to take a look at them. If not, what I'd like to do is I'd like to get these merged today after the call. So there is really there's no issue, and we can go ahead and continue the work, because I don't want the patches to linger too much. So this one is already there for like a couple of weeks almost. So I'd like to get this in, and if any comments can come, they can come later or at another point in time, and we can always update the protos. But I think this is a first good working version of them. So I think we can go ahead and merge them. Is there any objection if after the call I go ahead and merge the protos? No? Okay, good. Amit, do you have to make any more amendments to them before I merge this first draft?
No, Andrew, I think I'm good for now.
Okay. Then.
So the only thing we need to do is after integrating it or running it through the make files that you have done,
yes.
Now we need to see if the test script works fine or not.
Yeah, so what I think I'll do, I'll try and I'll ask Zach to override the -1 that Jenkins put in my patch, which is this one here. I'll override the -1. The -1 is just because it doesn't find a file that is not there, because the testing script is done in a way that it needs that file. But I'll just override Jenkins, merge this one, and then you can run yours to this make test, and either it succeeds, either it fails. If it succeeds, perfect. If it doesn't, push amendments, and we can merge your patch. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. So after your changes are merged, I need to rebase and then do work on it.
Yeah. That's the point. Let me just make a note to merge myself. I'll do that. Okay. Next, any other comments on the protos before we go forward? No? Okay. Then the next topic that was discussed last week, and I wanted to hear if people have opinions or thoughts about it, is the data flow difference between the existing device interface, management interface, Redfish code that is out there, and the proposed API that might not flow everything through Kafka in terms of data. I have given some thought to it, and I think it's fine having Kafka as an option. But if somebody wants to query the API directly, I think the capability to do so should be provided. and that is what we do with the protos. Um, Also because some of the APIs are an immediate return on those protos, like get, that is not a streaming event. For the streaming events, I can concur that we can use Kafka, no problem. But for like the get of all the alarms on the device, there is really no need to go to Kafka. You just do a get request and get a response, and that's going to be enough. Does anybody have any other opinions? Anything that they want to discuss on that?
So for the streaming events, should we put thought into using gRPC streaming versus Kafka then if the other calls are just gRPC single requests?
So that is a very good option. That is a very good thought. I would actually like to use gRPC streaming instead of going to on the Kafka bus and then getting them out of the Kafka bus. This goes a little bit against what was done up until now. Unfortunately, I don't have the background of why it was done in a certain way. So if anybody knows, I'll be very happy to hear your thoughts on why up until now everything was streamed on Kafka.
I thought it was to do, and I'm not going to be authoritative on this, but I thought it was to do with how many people were listening, right? If there's a single listener, then gRPC streaming point to point works. If there's multiple people listening for something, then a technology like Kafka could make more sense.
So, Amit, in your architecture, because I'm just going to be referring to you, in my opinion, this would only be NEM, meaning that there will only be one component listening to events. But is that a correct assessment? Is that a fair assessment?
So it depends on what you define as the component, right? So yes, logically it would be a NEM, but the NEM could be composed of multiple containers, right? Multiple services.
Yes.
So it could be multiple guys who are listening on different things, or it could be, it depends on the architecture that is used to implement the NEM, right?
Okay, but like for example, alarms, the alarm subscription, I would call it an alarm NEM manager or something like that. There's not going to be many people listening on alarms. There's going to be just one component, one object, one element. Is that a fair assessment? Or there can be like 3, 4, and then we go Kafka?
So I think we should not put a restriction on that, right? So if you leave it open, right? So if you do it through a bus kind of an architecture, and Kafka is one of them, right? Then you leave it open. So it depends on the implementation as to how they want to. They could run one instance of it or multiple instances of it. They could have different services handling metrics, handling alarms, right? So I think it gives complete flexibility to the implementations. Whereas if we say that, okay, we want to use gRPC stream for that, we're pretty much saying that, okay, this is how you need to implement it.
Well, there's a little more than that, I would think, right? Because you could have more than one gRPC streaming client. With Kafka, you get, Kafka potentially buffers the messages, and so you can go back in history. With gRPC streaming, when you connect and start to stream, likely you only get events while you're connected. You don't go history. You wouldn't, if you get disconnected and reconnect, if you miss an event, you lose it forever. So there's limitations in using gRPC streaming, and it means if we do use gRPC streaming, the device management implementation would have to say, oh, how many streaming clients I have, and for every event, put it on the stream of each one. If we use Kafka, it's kind of all handled by Kafka, but there is some overhead. So I think it does largely depend on use case. Again, I don't necessarily have a preference. I'm just raising the question.
I would also agree that it mainly is about the use case, perhaps. So, for example, if you query something which just takes longer and you want to have more an asynchronous operation, so I think streaming is nice. But for example, when you do a software update, I think it would be better to have all events related to software update also in Kafka, so that you can see, and so that Kafka is one source of truth. So you will probably see other events, alarms or something after or before or during the software update. And so I think it might be better to have everything in Kafka related to the software update as well.
And that might have been some of the reason for Kafka originally too, is some of these gets, even single value gets, were not instantaneous, right? They're essentially blocking for a significant time. And the minute you put a message bus in there or some sort of streaming mechanism in there, you have this kind of asynchronous nature to the API, which can be helpful.
But I think for these, I think streaming is, from my point of view, okay. But I think for me, software update is a huge event in the system, and so I would have it. I prefer to have it somewhere which is like a Kafka bus, where I can go later on and read it again or something, or which gets, or many parties can read it.
So at the moment,
Yeah, these.
This one implements actually a stream, but nothing prevents you to push the event to Kafka too.
I mean, are you suggesting to have a Kafka proxy, that if you have a deployment that what's Kafka, you create a streaming client and that streaming client puts it on Kafka?
It could be the object implementing this element itself. It doesn't. What I mean is coming back to the software update. This returns a stream, but it's not mandatory that this is the only place we send the events to.
Yeah, I think that gets confusing though if we expect the implementation of this interface to say, look, I'm going to put it both on a stream and Kafka.
Well, but the point is that this API does not mandate Kafka. So we cannot say, oh, put it on a Kafka bus.
Yes, that's true.
So if we say that Kafka is important, we can have a set of guidelines saying, please do this. But there is no way we can control through the API itself the fact that it's going to be used Kafka. The one place where we can control it, if we don't place the stream, then the only option is that you output it somewhere like a bus, like a Kafka bus. But if we do put a stream there, as it is right now, then it's up to good practice that we put it also on the Kafka bus. We cannot enforce it. Does that make sense?
Right. Kafka is not part of protobuf. Agreed. If we're doing events, it's always kind of a best practice in terms of where the events are being published.
Yep.
But we also have protobufs here, which are meant to be pushed to Kafka, right? So like alarms, so they only push to Kafka. There's no streaming for it, right? And this is also not documented.
Yeah, that I agree. We should probably document the fact that we expect events and metrics to be pushed to Kafka. But nothing prevents us to have also the stream, as David was suggesting, because as we do here in this one, we have the stream and you put it there. If you want to put it also to Kafka, because the implementation requests as a system that you have also the events on Kafka, more than welcome to, but we cannot really mandate it. That is what I'm saying. We can suggest it and we can document it. We need to do that. So I can actually assign this to Amit saying, please document on the events and metrics.
And any streaming interface of events or any of these things will have limitations when compared to Kafka, right? Because I don't think we want to have the implementation manage event history so that if someone connects and disconnects and reconnects, they get the history. So anything coming over a GRP stream would just be kind of what's happening now. So it's already limited. So the question then becomes, if the requirements are kind of the more complex event mechanisms, history, retry, all that good stuff, is there any reason we shouldn't just say, look, anything that is asynchronous or of that nature should just be going over Kafka and not stream?
Well, effectively, it is what we're doing right now. Because
right, so
if you look here at for example, at the metrics, there is really no stream here. You either get a metric, the immediate value, you update some configuration, you list them, but the only way the metrics are outputted from anything that implements this, it's something else, not gRPC.
Yep. So I think from what I've been hearing, I think we just stick with that.
Yeah.
But the other reason, I think, I'm trying to remember this as we go forward, we had even the single get metrics response go over Kafka it was just, I want to say, it was, that way you always had a single data path, right? Regardless if I was getting one or many, was I think part of the also reason that we said single gets go over Kafka as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's fine by me. Guy, Amit, would this agreement go with Kafka fine by you and Deutsche Telekom at large?
Yeah, I think from a conceptual perspective, I think, yeah, that's fine. But from an implementation perspective, so say if I'm looking for the single gets from the bus, right? Then that would mean that I have to look into each message that is coming from the bus.
Yeah. Yeah, a get was
additional
more of,
overhead.
Yeah, agreed. A get was less. It's less than a get. It's more of a, hey, could you send this data?
Yeah.
And presumably the person that's listening for the single value is the same component that's listening for everything else. If that's not the case, yeah, I think it does get a little. It does increase the overhead.
Yeah, so the thought was that the Kafka generally would be used for periodic matrices, which are like collected periodically, as well as events, which are basically completely asynchronous, right? No one knows when they're going to come. Yeah. So, yeah, so that was the idea that Kafka could be used for that. And also the other fact is because it's a bus, it gives us flexibility as to who can consume it. Yeah. If you look at other APIs, right, they are more of a point-to-point thing, and they need an immediate return. And that's why the thought was that they could go over gRPC.
Yep. No, and I'm okay with that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Perfect. That is fine. That is fine by me. We could in the future evaluate the possibility if we find out that there is a very specific use case where there are a lot of components listening for a very small subset of metrics and a very small subset of events. We could evaluate the possibility of having, for example, a subscribe to a specific metric, because that really cannot be done at that level of fine grain through Kafka, because you subscribe to a topic. And I would not venture as far as going a one topic per metric. That seems a little complicated to me. So we could evaluate in the future if there is a need to separate the components a lot more and listen for very specific set of metrics and events, and not just any metric or any event, to have that stream in here. But I think for a first implementation, it's fine pushing everything to Kafka. So that's perfect. Okay. Any more comments on this?
Sorry, so this means that for the software update, we keep with the streams and not using Kafka, right?
So again, I think that there is a stream here, okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the expectation is that at least on this stream, the notification arrives, but nothing prevents you to push it also to Kafka.
Okay.
So the guy listening that makes the request, the guy that makes the download image request is certain to get a response back on the stream. If somebody else is also listening and it's listening on Kafka and this event gets pushed to Kafka, I'm perfectly fine with that. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah. So
That makes sense. I worry a little bit about kind of the inconsistencies, I guess. Some things are done one way, some things are done another, some are done both. I think that can get confusing to users.
I think my problem is more that I will be probably the one implementing the device management, and there might be different customers. Some customers might think that they want to have it in Kafka, one want to have it, they're not interested in Kafka. So what I'm doing, what do I do when I do the implementation for it? Am I doing it both ways, or that's okay? So okay, but anyway, I understood it. So
Holger, if I might ask, like, is there a specific reason why you would think that it would make more sense for this software return synthesis to go over Kafka than the gRPC?
For example, if you configure to receive metrics every, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, or 5 minutes or whatever, so you configure these metrics, you want to see them every 15 minutes, and then you do software updates, which means you will probably not receive a metrics for some point in time. So I could imagine that customers coming to me and telling me that there are metrics missing in the Kafka stream, and I will be not able to tell the reason perhaps for it, because I cannot see that the software update was happening at the same time, because the event was sent over a different stream, not over Kafka. So it would be easier to correlate these events in this case, to correlate the metrics and alarms and everything, because everything is in Kafka. But if this one customer is perfectly fine that everything comes over streams and just the metrics over Kafka, it's okay with me. So,
but that is to me an implementation detail, meaning that let me explain why I'd like to keep this here. Metrics and events are not a key thing. If you lose the collection of metric and events, you can still live without those. But if you don't get a reply on an update of the software, that is a much more important object. And that is why I think that this is important to be kept as a request response type of.
I would actually argue that a stream for that is actually less guaranteed to get a response. I could have a client call the gRPC, create a stream to begin a download, and then have a network issue, and I'm now disconnected, and I have no way to get that event. Where if that event's always put in Kafka, presumably it's now buffered somewhere that I can go back and read it. So I would say in terms of that use case, having to always get an event about a download on Kafka is actually a better guarantee.
Makes sense. Yeah, I was not thinking about the network failure. That is very true. Guys, what do you think? Because the option is to remove that, but I don't like to remove that call and just not have anything returning here. It's a little worrying to me.
It's essentially a request to begin a download.
It is, but you are also mandating some sort of response to having a return here. If you don't have the return there, you kind of hope that the guys put it on Kafka.
Well, I mean, you could have a return there that basically says, look, I'm acknowledged that I've got the request, and that's all it can ever do. Because again, the network failure completely invalidates what you're trying to accomplish.
Yep.
Or even a software crash. Even if the client crashes, you can't get it back. Right? So.
Yep. Amit, what do you think? Could we just say return acknowledge here and expect the event on the Kafka bus?
It's doable. It's doable, but so in that case, what we would have to think about is that all communication, right, or all asynchronous events coming back or messages coming back should be on the bus.
Fair enough. Yes. Yeah.
But do we
If
really
you're trying to correlate, then that API probably needs to return some, by the way, here's some request ID. So when you're looking for download image events on the bus, here's how to tell which one I'm related to. You know, this call is related to.
Yeah, so definitely a transaction concept needs to be brought in there, right? So my question is, where we really are doing a point-to-point communication, right? Do we really need to bring in a bus?
Where's the point-to-point communication?
Between, so when we are asking for this, say, image download, right? It's a point-to-point, right?
You're asking for an image download to start.
Correct.
And so that's a point-to-point
Response
RPC
coming
call.
back, yeah, and
So
the response is expected only to come back to the same guy.
the response is no. The response to a please start a download is yep, I will start it. Acknowledged. That's the response to restart a download. By the way, it could be part of that response could be, by the way, if you're interested in events on how that download's going,
yeah,
here's a transaction ID, go watch Kafka. In terms of trying to limit who is the ability to see those messages, that's where message security comes in, i.e., if we really care that only one and only one person sees those events, then you're talking about certificates and all encryption and all that type of stuff. If you're saying, again, even on a download, I initiate a download, I could have 12 different UIs looking to update based on that download, right? I could have 12 different customer service representatives watching the same screen, seeing downloads tick in. I'm not sure it's a point-to-point communication, except to please start the download. Just one person's opinion.
yeah, I get your point, David. But yeah, somehow I am getting a feeling that it's becoming with this, right? It becomes more complicated, right?
It does. I agree with that. But the question is, if we're looking for more complicated semantics, and again, if we're saying we have to have a client to be able to read the download completed event, and there may be others intermediate events, but if we have to guarantee that, the only way, or the way that we have better guarantees around that is to use Kafka, because the minute you do gRPC streaming, any problem with that connection and you can't reconnect, you've lost the event, right? Or you start putting more complexity into the server in terms of essentially trying to manage transactions, trying to manage history, saving events until they're read, and that point, your implementation starts to look like a lot like a message broker. And
yeah, completely.
so why not just use it?
Yeah, so if you use Kafka, it can give you the persistence of the events
Yeah.
that are happening. If you don't use Kafka, if you go only with gRPC, then you need to build in that persistence into your service itself, right? That, okay, this is
Yes.
what I was doing before I crashed, now I came back, so I need to take care of it. Else I could just have gone into the bus and picked it up from where I left, or whatever I was processing last. Yeah,
Mhm.
so there are pros and cons of it. I think we should think a little bit more about it, right? And then do we think we need to come to a decision in today's call, or do we take some time to think a little bit more on this? Because this, anyways, is not affecting uh, the interface as such, right? That is more about the implementation choice that.
Well, the only way it would affect the interface is that streaming call right there, because it would change that streaming call potentially into a non-streaming call, with the response being some sort of information about the process that just started.
Yeah, I would agree with David. I think the call has to be made because it's not an implementation detail. It is a fact that we either make this a stream or we don't.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we need to ponder a little bit more on that, because I don't completely agree that the events and the matrices and this messages, right, which are coming back, should come back on, or should all be on the same topic, right? Because we again back to the same problem of processing overhead. And if they are sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and if they are on different topics, right, then I don't know how exactly the problem that Holger brought up, right, that because what he wants to do is that he's wanting to sequence all the events that are happening on the implementation, on the device manager implementation, as to what is happening, right? Now, if those are spread across different topics, I don't know if that can be stitched together so easily. So well, I don't know if what we're getting into is really solving the problem that we're trying to.
But well, you can listen on multiple topics and you would receive all the events from the multiple topics in the right order.
Not in the right order, right? Because each topic has its own order. And depending on the load that is there on a topic, it would be completely different, right?
So sequence, well, I would expect different types of messages to be on different topics. I wouldn't expect all messages to be on a single topic. In terms of trying to sequence, so it might be all image update messages might be on the same topic, but those wouldn't be on the same topic with performance metrics. Does that make sense?
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
Okay. Now, in terms of trying to correlate, load image messages with performance messages, I don't know the use case, but I think what you're left to at that point is likely origin timestamp on messages in order to do sequencing, if you really have to sequence across those topics with NTP around to try to keep all the times in sync. And yeah, there's some, you may not be perfect sequence, but I'm not. I don't know the use case why there's a requirement to sequence across messages of different types like that.
So is that a strong requirement, Holger? What are your thoughts? You brought this up. So how would you see this happening?
I really do not for sure, because I'm not the one who's implementing, the one who's sitting on top of it. So we just had in our history problems that you have to correlate these events with something, and if there are alarms missing and so on. So I don't know. Sorry, it's just, I was just thinking that from my point of view, it would be better to have everything there. So I would like to have it in one source. If you say it's different topics, and if we have, I'm not sure, sorry.
Okay. Should we give it some more thought? Let's say put it a week, so you, Amit, can discuss internally, and Holger, you can maybe give some more thought to it within Altran 2, and maybe
Yeah.
and maybe submit the patch without the software management. I mean, everything else here is perfectly fine to me. We have no discussion there. This is where we're discussing the most. So we could just submit this and keep these aside for like one more week. Would that make sense?
Why not submit it in total? I mean, I wouldn't have a problem in changing it later on. Do you? So it's, I mean, there will be changes anyhow. So I actually would love to have it somewhere which is not Garrett. I mean, not in a review at least. So I would propose to merge it and have it available, and then it's even easier to discuss it.
Oh, we just change the version when we change it. Is anybody opposed to that?
Yeah.
No, good, perfect. Then go ahead like that, as we discussed before. Let's give it some more thought in, let's say, a week. This one. Okay. Perfect. I just have. Okay.
Sorry,
any more?
just a question. I mean, is there? I don't know that. And is there? How's it done in Volta? Is there anything like that? Are there any events about? I don't know. Are there any events pushed to Kafka if you update an ONU via Volta, for example? Would there be an event pushed to Kafka, or is it also done using gRPC streaming?
We at the moment don't have support for ONU update in Kafka in Volta, so I don't know. Maybe David, you know more since you might have given some thought to it. But I would say it will go through gRPC probably at the moment. Because
what goes? Most things go through Kafka for async messaging. Maybe I missed the question.
The question was, how do we do basically on the ONU update in Volta? I was saying we don't have that first. In general, we don't.
Sorry, Andrea. Sorry to interrupt. So the ONU upgrade code is present. It was tested quite some time back. We don't know what the latest status of that is, but the code does exist on the Volta API interface too. So there are APIs like download image, activate image, revert image. That's specifically for the ONU software upgrade.
And do you know how the feedback is? Is it pushed to Kafka, or is it also gRPC streaming or something?
It's on the Volta interface, so it's gRPC. Now internally, Volta core and adapters would be talking over Kafka, but that is something that's hidden from the users of Volta.
Yeah, that is why I was saying that since it's going to be basically an API-driven event in the existing code base, I would have expected it to be through gRPC. Maybe there is also something that goes to Kafka in that piece of code, and that comes back to what I was saying at the start. We can do both, but the API, I think it's gRPC reply basically.
Yeah, the API is gRPC based, but I think you pass in like a file URL a moniker, either local file or HTTP, and the device adapter, the OLT device adapter is responsible for fetching it. Or I guess it's actually the ONU device adapter does the fetch and push.
But then how is the response to that? There is no response to that, to that call of update ONU? Or where do you see
that? Yeah, I'm not sure what on the final when you issue the. I think it's pretty much asynchronous. You you start the download, and you can inspect the status of some kind of state variable on what the capability is or where the progress is.
Okay.
So it's a polling mechanism, in other words.
Yeah, it's a polling mechanism.
Yeah, I think it's a polling mechanism over gRPC to say, what's the status state.
So that's, and to be fair, for things that have state like that, you want both kind of, we're going to send you events on state changes, and if you want to know the current state, go ahead and query the current state.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any event notification. This is pure poll.
Okay, then maybe what I'll do, I'll bring it up next week, and if people give some thought to it, I'll be more than happy. And then if we want to make a change to the protos, we can just make a change to the protos and call it a day. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, so next up is the short list of parameters. I think we discussed plenty of this last time. Amit, do you have any update on the BMC from DT?
No idea.
Okay, I guess I'll need to involve Manuel in this discussion.
But this is also a side topic, right? I don't know if this has a direct relevance.
Some of a side topic. Okay. Anything else on these? Anything else on these?
Yeah, sorry, I have one question on the metrics. When you want to get metrics periodically, you can specify some time, and this is just I think an unsigned 32 value, and there's no. Is it seconds? What is it? And I think we should perhaps.
There's no unit involved specified.
Yeah. Do we need some, I don't know, some minimum value or something, which is
this one?
Makes sense. Yeah, the poll interval. I mean, currently you can specify. I think perhaps a 1 would be 1 second, maybe, or something, which isn't even possible, I guess. So it's what are we? Can we get at some just some number? What we're thinking about, is this like 15 minutes or so, or 5-10 minutes, an hour, or?
Go ahead.
There is a Google protobuf duration.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
Should that be changed to that? And then you'd at least have units associated with it. You still need, there's some minimal that needs to be documented, and or when I actually make a request, if I'm below a minimal, the request is denied.
Yeah. Is there a can we provide a default in protobuf?
Not sure. Is this a what do I want to say? Is this a subscription in that I could call this different times with two different durations from two different clients, and the message would be given at those two different durations, or is this a kind of global setting? This is how often this event is done, regardless of how many
I
people
think
call
the
this.
second one, it's regardless.
Okay.
So this is a one-time thing. For that metric, you output it either every 5 seconds, either every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes.
It's a last right wins type of thing. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Or you could say, actually, you could make it a little smarter and say the least one wins, the minimum one wins. Like if somebody asks every 5 seconds and somebody asks every 15 minutes, the 15 minutes one can ignore everything in the span of 15 minutes.
Yeah, but that gets real complicated real quick because you don't know if the guy who said I need it every 5 seconds is still listening a day later or not. And
No, that's true. Okay, I guess this is an implementation detail, and
yeah, I think it's much easier to say it's a last one right wins.
okay. But yeah, I agree. Duration could be a possible good one, and if the request goes under the minimum, it's denied. It's a good point. Okay. Anything else on this? Okay. No? Great. Perfect. So next up, David, I think it's you could take it better than I do. There is some we discussed about authentication authorization last week and some role-based access, and David put together a example of how we can extend our protos with that. We can maybe give an overview this week and allow people to give some thought to it for next week, because I do have a hard stop at 6. So in 8
Right.
minutes. So,
Just real quickly, it's using the JSON Web Token capability. So there is a repo there you can go play with, and basically you are using certs to guarantee that a message is from who you think it is, and then you can of course map that to roles and authorizations. This doesn't change the protos. In other words, it's carried along with the context. So that's good from the fact that it doesn't really have to change a lot of our code. There is an outstanding discussion I'm having with someone that even does this belong in our code, or does this belong in something like a sidecar like Istio, and do it there. So there's still some questions about that, but feel free to take a look. Happy to field any questions people have.
yep. Thanks, David. So I'll encourage everybody to go and take a look at this proposal. I actually like it. It's very. I think it's pretty easy, and if we could put it in at a fairly soon in our API, I think it perfectly solves many of our issues. And if somebody asks what you guys do about authorization, like checking and everything, this is it.
Yeah, and the one thing important it brings beyond authorization, I think, is that accountability, right? I know who did what.
Yes, indeed. So especially, I'm thinking about Holger, Amit, and everybody who's involved in the proto buff design. I would like you to consider this as an option and see if it's worth integrating in, maybe not the first batch, but fairly soon, I would say.
Okay.
Would that work, Amit? Can you take a look?
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, David, for putting it together. And I guess if anybody has any questions, you can ping David on Slack or send him an email or whatever.
Yep.
I don't actually recall why alarms was put in here. I think it was discussed prior to this and in the short list here. So I'm just gonna drop this. And this one I did not add. Who added this one? Nobody?
Andrea, this was added by me, Kafka topic, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So, so I just added this just to capture this point, right?
Okay.
So, so regarding the topic on which, or topic or topics, right, on which event and matrices, or if you choose to even send the other communication through Kafka, right, the topics that should be used should be completely configurable, right? Based on a deployment, you should be able to choose the names of the topics on which you would send across this different kind of messaging.
Yeah, so this completely configurable topic, would it make sense to have an API in our protos to do that?
No.
Why? Because I don't think you're going to change it dynamically. Isn't this just a startup config issue?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
Okay.
at startup, you could pass the name of the topics to the containers, and that's it, right? Startup config.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have some proposal already?
No, I don't have a proposal of what could be the default names of the topics.
Okay.
Not yet. But yeah, if anyone has any suggestions, please feel free to.
My only recommendation would be use environment variables to configure it. Kind of along the lines of 12 factor apps.
Sorry, David, come again. I missed this.
You use environmental variables to configure the different topics. Just so then when you start containers, you just set the environment variable on the container and go.
So David, are you saying that we shouldn't use it through the Helm install values that we pass? It would be better to go with environment variables.
Again, if you look at how what did I say, Kafka itself is configured, you do set the environment variables via the values file. It's just along the lines of 12-factor apps. It's using environment as opposed to flags to set the configuration. So if you look at, like, in the latest version of KindVolta, if you look at the minimals file, the minimal values file, and look under Kafka, you'll see it has a value called env overrides, and essentially there is a list of configurations that essentially get set on the container environment.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
so
also through the environment and how the KV store prefix is being set, unlike the libgo.
Yeah, then in that case, I think we should identify, or at least, propose what those environment variables should be called here, right? So that it remains consistent.
Yeah.
But I mean, isn't that totally implementation dependent? I mean, it's.
You want some coordination so that all our components that care about the topic are using the same environment variables.
I think for me, it's more important. We're talking about two topics here, right? One for events, one for metrics, not more.
We can actually have three: one for metrics, one for events, one for software. If we go down that route.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're right at the top of the hour. I would say we had some great discussions. There's some action points. I encourage everybody to especially take a look at this one. Give some thought to the names and variables and Kafka topics here, and put some thought into whether we go with Kafka or gRPC for the software update. I think these are going to be the topics of discussion for next week. Let's try and come with some suggestions, some ideas that everybody can come up with in a week. In the meantime, I'll merge the make file and then Amit, please do take a look at that comment we made about the duration, and then we can actually merge these two. Okay.
Yes, Andrew. So after you merge the make files, I'll pull that on and try compiling the current thing. And along with that, I'll rework on all the review comments that are there and then upload it.
Sounds perfect. So just a small comment from me. I am going to be off Monday and Tuesday. So if anything needs to be merged, please refer to anybody else who has a +2 on that repo, namely Amit, David, Seraph, and etc. So just one minor point on myself. Okay. Anything else that anybody has? Okay. Then if not, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for the great discussion, and I'll see you next week. Let's continue chatting on Slack and email. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.